Oh, yeah.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Okay, well, now that we have completed sentence structure, now the only logical next step is not to completely leave sentence structure, but the logical next step is to deal with the errors that can occur when you do not place the elements and the parts of a sentence together correctly in a sentence. And there are really three main issues that deal directly with sentence structure, and that is sentence fragments, sentence run-on, and comma splices. And we're going to continue to deal with those. We've already discussed sentence fragments, which in my opinion is the most difficult of them. And if you get that concept, this next concept is going to be really easy, which is, of course, comma splices and run-ons. And we're going to discuss them at the same time because they are so closely related, because they deal so closely with the same mistake. And here we're mainly talking about independent clauses and how you use them in the sentence. So this is why I say they are much easier than the sentence fragments. So let's okay, I'm not as prepared as I should be right now. 1 second. Well, that's kind of embarrassing. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so okay. No, it's not okay. What's going on now? Okay, whoa. Okay, so now let's get busy here. Sorry for the little bit of delay. Okay, how to avoid comma splices and run-on sentences. All right. Well, the first thing we need to know is, first one that we need to know, of course, is the run-on sentence. It is the one that is probably the most common among the errors, and the easiest to correct. That's simply when we're trying to take two independent clauses, and put them together with nothing. And in this case, since we're talking about clauses, it doesn't really matter how long the sentence is. You can have an extremely long sentence and it not be a run-on, and you can have a really short sentence and it be a run-on. So the size of the sentence matters not, and whether or not the sentence is a run-on. I think the most important thing to note about the run-on is that you do have two independent clauses being connected incorrectly. So let's go into a little more detail here. And, well, without actually going into what is a run-on sentence, I'd rather deal with how to correct it. So I need for you to make sure, as you went over the SCORM, that you dealt with, how to correct, these types of errors. And they're really easy to correct. I mean, you could take the two independent clauses and make two simple sentences. You can add a coordinating conjunction, of course, one of the fanboys. Of course, make sure you don't forget the comma when you're using the fanboys. You can also do that by one of the punctuation marks that we discussed when we talked about the types of sentences, which of course is the semicolon, the conjunctive adverb, transitional phrase, so forth and so on. Or you can do the road less traveled, which is to take a subordinating conjunction and place it at the beginning of one of the independent clauses, thus making that clause a dependent clause. Either of these four will work when you're talking about correcting the run-on sentence, but of course you have to use one of them because you just can't go around with a run-on sentence and not correct it. Now, Let me familiarize you a little bit with conjunctive adverbs. Of course, conjunctive adverbs are those words that we use to connect independent clauses, and they go something like accordingly, afterwards, also, anyhow, anyway, as a result, at last, at the same time, besides, consequently, early, so forth and so on. I think that, probably familiarizing yourself with this list would be greatly beneficial to you, because this is a really good list to know when you're talking about, sentence structure in general, not just fixing the run-on sentences here. Okay, so let's go over some examples, and let's see if we can figure out what the problem is with these examples. Okay. She was not able to admit she was an alcoholic. In fact, she did not even think she had a problem. So here we have a sentence, and I think right off you can notice the two subject-verb relationship. She was, she did, and she had. Now, the problem is it looks like we're missing something. I don't know. I mean, of course, you had to decide that when you were going over the SCORM activity. And if you decided that we were, you're right. Because what we did, all we did here is we just took a bunch of independent clauses and we just slapped them together. And we are a term that is sometimes used in the world of grammar is fused them together. So sometimes a run-on sentence is called a fused sentence, whereas you take independent clauses and you just put them together without any type of conjunction or punctuation that would join them. Well, that's the problem here. I think probably a good remedy for that would be she was not able to admit she was an alcoholic. A simple semicolon and a comma here remedied this situation. This enabled us to be able to add, this clause, and of course this clause, which actually were the same in one. So fixing this run-on sentence was a bit easy because we were just using a conjunctive adverb here without any type of punctuation to go with it. Of course, we remember that in order to use a conjunctive adverb, we must use a semicolon in front of it and a comma after it. That is the rule. So just by not using that punctuation creates a problem for us, and in eventuality is a run-on sentence. What is a clause? We already know what a clause is, and we already know the difference between a clause and a phrase. A clause is a group of organized words that expresses a thought, and of course a phrase is a group of organized words that does not contain a subject-verb relationship. So understanding that, we can look at these sentences, and I want to look at these sentences. I want you to, since we're talking about run-on sentences, we have to look at these sentences in parts, in pieces, because if we're looking for the clauses, and we won't find them if we're looking at the sentences as one piece. And we kind of discussed that when we talked about sentence fragment, the fact that, in multi-clause sentences, we have to be aware that, although the sentence is one, the clauses are parts, and we have to look at the part before we look at the whole. Let's read the sentence here. At first, my Japanese was very poor, and communication was slow, but with practice, my Japanese improved greatly. So here we have, okay. The problem is not that but we are using it to subordinate. The problem is that we actually need a comma before but. This was a really simple solution here because we know when we're using the fanboys, we must place a comma before it. So, it's really important to note that the punctuation that goes with the conjunctions, especially the coordinating conjunctions, the correlative conjunctions, they are extremely important. I mean, we can't just leave them out because the punctuation marks indicate that we're using this conjunction to join independent clauses. If we don't use that punctuation mark, then no longer does that conjunction become one that specifically joins independent clauses, but it becomes one that can join any group of words. Okay, so let's continue here. I hit him and he bled. Well, obviously we have a subject-verb relationship, I hit, and another, he bled, and we can't just connect them with and. As we discussed before, the punctuation mark definitely needs to be there in order for us to be able to consider this a corrected sentence. And here, of course, we added the comma and, the comma with and. So, I mean, I know that may seem slight, but it is actually a big deal. So I need for you to remember that when you're using the fanboys especially and the correlative conjunctions, you must make sure you use the proper punctuation that goes along with them. This is like mandatory. Anyway, okay, so that's the run-on sentence or the fused sentence. I think that's probably the easiest of the three errors. Now let's talk about the comma splice. And they're so closely related that you might end up thinking they're the same thing. I mean, because comma splice just means that you use the comma without the conjunction. Basically, that's what comma splice did. I mean, with the run-on sentence, we thought we were using the conjunction without the comma. So now we're talking about the comma splice where we're using the comma basically without the conjunction. So, I mean, same deal, different thing, but they're so closely related that you wonder if they wouldn't be considered the same thing. And the only reason we kind of make it a special term, comma splice, is because that is exactly the problem that you're using the comma. Obviously, if it didn't have a comma in the sentence and it was a run-on sentence, it wouldn't be a comma splice. I mean, that makes sense, I think. Okay, so what is a comma splice? I think I kind of broke down what a comma splice is. And basically, it's when you separate the independent clause into two sentences without using one of the core conjunctive adverbs, conjunctive adverbs or coordinating conjunctions, and you just have the comma itself. How can you correct them? You can correct them in the same ways that you can correct a run-on sentence. So not much difference there. Okay. Now, of course, I don't have to go show you the conjunctive adverbs again. I think you kind of have an idea of what they are. But let's look at this sentence here. Some students think they can study for an important exam by cramming all night, comma, they are probably wrong. Now, right off, when we break this sentence down, we can see the clauses. Some students think is our subject-verb relationship, okay? They can study for an important exam by cramming all night. They are is our another subject-verb relationship, probably wrong. Now, obviously, in this example, we have a comma splice. We got a comma connecting two independent clauses, and, we don't have anything else. That's a comma splice, and that's how it looks. A very slight error there, but very serious because, that, puts us in the realm of error in sentence structure, and we can't have that. So obviously, we would definitely correct that by adding the conjunction. Now, here's a few situations where the run-on, a run-on sentence may, and we're talking about run-on sentences again. I don't want to get off too much into talking specifically about comma splices because they're so close to run-on sentences. I think we can pretty much put them together in our minds as a pair. Okay, now, let's read the sentence here. The president's popularity has plummeted, comma, she apparently underestimated the opposition. And of course, we must be talking about Hillary Clinton. I just said a joke. Okay, anyway, okay, back to business. Okay, now, when a pronoun in the second clause refers to a noun in the first clause, then of course, this happens. That pronoun in the second clause obviously is the subject of that clause. We do have two independent clauses here, and obviously we cannot connect them with a comma. And here we go again. You will be responsible for this material on the final exam. Study it thoroughly. This is, of course, and many people think protectionism can halt rising prices. However, the opposite is actually true. This is the sentence I actually wanted to get to. The other two sentences are pretty, self-explanatory. But here we have, however, we know it's a conjunctive adverb, and we know that it should have a semicolon here, but we just have a comma. Now that is another common comma splice problem where a student would put the comma instead of the semicolon. That, of course, is wrong. You can't do that. You must use the semicolon. So that's just another way of looking at a comma splice issue. Okay, so go over the SCORM activity and familiarize yourself with those. I want to get back to the practice here. It was time-consuming, but that didn't matter. We started to enjoy the ride, and it brought us closer. Well, of course, we got a comma splice problem here, and of course, the only comma that we do see is here, and well, the problem is that we didn't put a comma here, and we didn't do anything here. So, actuality, I think we have more of a fused sentence here than a comma splice because we didn't add the proper punctuation, and we didn't try to do something about, putting these two independent clauses together. So the remedy, of course, or one of the remedies would be to make this a second sentence and, of course, add the comma here. So I think, we can look at them as a pair comma splice fused sentence, but I don't think we can apply the whole comma splice issue here. Okay, so let's look at another sentence here. The program uses no tax dollars. It is a private program which follows the new direction for space development set by the president. Well, of course, we definitely have a comma splice problem here, and that goes without saying. And one of the ways we definitely can correct it is to put to separate the two sentences and make them two sentences. But I want to bring a point to something else that I think needs to be mentioned here. We always want to put a comma before which. We always want to put a comma before which. And I'm wondering if you noticed that when you read the sentence, because back when we were talking about, dependent clauses and subordinating conjunctions, we mentioned that we must always use a comma before which. So I'm hoping that you picked that up when we read the sentence and saw that the revision did not have the needed comma. Okay, so let's review real quick. Comma splices, run-on sentences, one in the same, occur when two sentences, of course, are not joined correctly. And I want to look at the two sentence thing as two independent clauses. So I know I have sentence here, but I want you to think independent clause here, independent clause here. And when we have two independent clauses together, we can't just join them with the comma. And when we have two independent clauses next to each other, we can't leave them alone. We have to do something to them. So, okay, so that's our review. We'll continue to review. I know you had the SCORM activity. You should get these down in your notebook because these are really good. A good way to kind of remember the ways to correct a run-on sentence or a comma splice and make it a part of your memory. But more important than for you, of course, because you're dealing with the SAT, more important for you to write these sentences is for you to be able to identify when these sentences or types of errors in these sentences occur. But there again, practice also should involve you writing sentences correctly. You seeing your writing correct, and then you turn around and you're reading. Of course, you do your reading every day, and you're seeing authors use these use this sentence structure correctly. Then when you see it not used correctly, it'll become much more apparent to you. All right, so last comments here. You got the SCORM activity. You need to take these notes, but for the sake of argument here, separate the two sentences with a period. You can use a comma in coordinating conjunction. You can use a semicolon. You can use a conjunctive adverb, subordinated conjunction, of course, one from the chart that we went over, and of course, you definitely can use a dash if you know how to use a dash, as we discussed when we went over the sentence types. Okay. Well, that's it for run-on sentence and comma splice. It's not that difficult, not rocket science for sure. And I hope in the future you can avoid using those types or making those types of errors and all of that. Anyway, that's it for us.
This is an Islamic school. We'll talk about tomorrow. That's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little minibuses.
Welcome to the newtimeflash.com. Welcome to the newtimeflash.com.
Oh yeah. All right. Check this out.
I would not be asking any one of you to take this leap if I did not have complete faith in your ability to succeed. Your courage will never be more needed than it is today.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.